You are not just another hustling salesperson. You are the expert, the resource, the valuable partner for your clients. And how you grow your business should reflect how your clients see you. Welcome to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. We generate referrals without asking, build positive client experiences, and help you take control of your business. Here's your charmingly sarcastic host, Stacy Brown Randall.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 161 of the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Stacy Brown Randall. Okay, we are welcoming back Jackie Ho from Ho and Lacy Architecture back to the podcast because she has some really awesome stuff to share with us on how she mastered her active client stage. So if this is the first time you've ever listened to this podcast or you're just a few episodes in, remember we are in the middle of our client experience series, which we've been talking about, dissecting and discussing since episode 151. So if you are new to this series, or maybe you haven't listened to the podcast in a while and you're getting back into it, you definitely going to want to go back to episode 151 and listen forward so that you can get all the pieces and parts of how I've broken down the client experience. We talk about how customer service is not the same thing as client experience. We talk about the nuts and bolts of the client experience. How do we define it? When does it start? We're now in the process of breaking down the 3 stages of the client experience as well. And we have been spending some time in each of those 3 stages. With our previous episode 159, I gave you the overview and the breakdown of the active client stage, which is the second stage of the client experience. And now we're going to hear from a business owner who's been through my Sticky Client Experience program, and you're going to listen as they talk about how they broke down that active client stage, the way they learned it within the Sticky Client Experience program, and put it into action within their business. So we did the new client stage, and then you guys heard from Erin, the travel consultant, of how she took what she had learned and made her new client stage better and allowed her to kind of organize it better and how she thought about it and executed on it better. And now we're going to do the same thing, listening to a business owner talk about how they took what they learned and put it into practice within the active client stage. So I'm so excited for you guys to hear from Jackie. And I do mention in our interview that she had been on the podcast previously. That's why we're just so excited to always welcome her back. And if you're looking for that episode, that is episode 142. So you can definitely always go and find that link to that episode on the show notes page for this episode, which is stacybrownrandall.com/161. That's 161. And of course, Stacy has an E. So if you want to go back and listen to her previous episode, that is another great episode to listen to, as Jackie talks about what it was like to start turning her clients and contacts into referral sources. For many people, when they come into the Growth by Referrals program and they identify who their existing referral sources are, they very quickly realize, I'm going to need more referral sources. Well, inside the Growth by Referrals program, they have access to a free training, which is now called How to Turn Clients and Contacts into Referring Machines, which we just refer to as, in short, Referring Machines training. They have access to that training that allows them to understand and learn and put into action the process of turning those clients and contacts into referral sources. And so Jackie, as she went through the Growth by Referrals program and identified her existing referral sources, she also put a focus on turning people into referral sources who've never referred her before. And she went through that training, and we have her on episode 142, and she talks about that experience and what it looked like for her to put that training into practice and the success, huge success that she had. But for this episode, she's back talking about how she took what she learned in the Sticky Client Experience program and put it into action. Specifically, I'm asking her about how she did that within the active client stage. So let's get to our interview with Jackie. Jackie, it is always fun to welcome you back to this show and to have you back on, because you bring such joy and happiness and always good results and news to share when you come on the podcast. So we're so excited to have you back. Thank you for being here.
I'm very happy to be here, Stacy, as always.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's just dive right in then. I've already done, of course, told folks who you are. And if they didn't know, I already referenced the episode that you did when you were just on a few months ago, so they can learn all about you as well. But this time we are talking about the client experience. And so I wanted to have you join us on the podcast because, as you know, we have been breaking down the client experience since episode 151. We've been breaking down the client experience into bite-sized pieces and really understanding what it looks like, kind of everything that you learned, of course, and more when you went through the Sticky Client Experience program. And where we are right now is that we understand that there's 3 stages in the client experience. We talked about the new stage, and then we had Erin on who kind of shared with us her aha moments of what it looked like building out her new client stage once she went through the client experience or the Sticky Client Experience program. And I wanted to have you on to kind of talk about that active stage, like the things you do to maintain not only the work touch points, but the relationship touch points during the active stage, which is the second stage of the client experience. But before we dive into answering questions specific to the active stage to follow the previous episode that we just had, I want to first kind of ask you about what really prompted you to even consider going through the Sticky Client Experience program to be from the perspective of what was it that you were looking to gain to learn more about your business from a client experience perspective?
What prompted me to do this kind of immediately followed finishing the training and implementing all the training from the referrals program. And that, thought process and intuition was pretty simple. I already knew we were referable. So it wasn't a matter of checking in to make sure we were referable, because not only could I see it in the referral results with the program I had already been implementing that, yes, we were referable, hence all the referrals we were getting. But even starting the business, going way back to a couple of years ago, we kind of went into this knowing that we kind of know what our unfair advantage is, right? What is our competitive advantage amongst our peers? Going into starting this business, we had a good idea of what that is. And that basically boils down to a much higher level of customer service that we deliver, and also just a very transparent experience that involves full project management that we would deliver to very high-end residential clients that we bring down to anybody who's trying to renovate their home, no matter what scale or price point. So knowing that really wasn't the driver, but what was the driver was, okay, now I've put all this work into taking care of my referral sources, cultivating new sources, dropping referral seeds, perfecting my buyer's journey to our prospective clients, which we've gotten very good at. Now we need to make sure that our clients' experience, delivers on those promises, number one, but also goes above and beyond that. So, we qualitatively had an intuition before about, yes, we know we're referable and we are delivering for our clients on XYZ, but we hadn't looked at it in a diagnostic way that the CX experience really allows us to do. It's almost like a doctor's checkup. It felt like, all right, let's look at our CX as it is now and identify what are our holes and our blind spots that we really hadn't thought about, and how can we just tighten it up and, get organized in a way that allows us to hold ourselves accountable and then do better beyond that.
I think that you bring up some really good points there. I mean, Erin even talked about when she was on a few episodes ago that the ability from the Sticky Client Experience program allowed her to get organized and kind of like see the big picture. And you use the exact same word, right? Kind of get organized with it. But I really love how you talked about looking at your client experience and using the program to support you to do like that diagnostic checkup and to really be like, okay, like we know intuitively things are happening because we're working with our clients every day. So there's an experience that's happening and there's one we're being intentional about, but let's break it apart by its pieces and really kind of see to hone in on what could be improved. Or in some cases, just like, yeah, check the box. We're doing really well, right? It's not like every time you do something, it's because you have to learn something new. Most of the time we do, but a lot of times it's just to make sure we're doing or we're performing or we're executing on, exactly as we think we are. So as you were looking at your client experience through the lens of how I teach it in the Sticky Client Experience program, of course, is what, we're doing now with this series on the podcast and what my next book will be about. But as you kind of looked at it from that perspective, that diagnostic perspective, and doing a checkup on your client experience, kind of using the program to kind of help you through that process, what was your biggest aha moment or thought that you guys had?
It shouldn't have surprised me, but I think the biggest surprise was, as Peter Drucker said, what's measured improves. So it's interesting because the client experience in my mind is measured pretty differently and tracked pretty differently than, say, the referral experience, which is more quantitative. This is more qualitative. But there's nonetheless, in my mind, still a way to measure it. And by that, I mostly am measuring kind of against our own past performance. And hopefully over time, as we gather data, right, we can see year on year, what are the differences and maybe even get real-time feedback on what's working and what's not. But yeah, the biggest aha has been, no surprise, if we measure and track it, we're going to see improvement.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And it's not something that I think we talk about enough, which is, you're right. There are certain things we do in our business where we can specifically see the metric that is tracked to that activity, right? When people go through the Growth by Referrals program or not, and they just decide to do something different, to get serious about their referrals, what we're tracking is number of referrals. It is very, very, it's there. The quantity is, that's what we're tracking. That's the number we're writing down. It fits neatly in an Excel spreadsheet, right? In terms of what we're looking for. But it is truly exactly as you said, this is more qualitative when it comes to our client experience. There isn't necessarily, hey, you're going to get a client experience improvement by 15% because there's a way to track that. I mean, to your point though, is you can see things work more efficiently, right? Or you can feel things work more efficiently. You start to have your clients say the things you want them to say back to you in terms of how amazing it is to work with you. And I believe that when you look at your client experience, it's like the well-oiled machine that's constantly producing that happy client. But in that case, it's not as if it is a direct, qualitative measure or quantitative measure back to some number. It's more than that, which is why I think for some folks, it's like a little overwhelming for them to start thinking about their client experience in that way. So was there anything that you learned when you went through the program or started doing your diagnostic checkup on your client experience? Is there anything you learned or hadn't considered before?
Two things come to mind on that front. I think it makes, when we get to the part where we talked about the journey map, I think it's module 3, that was another aha. I was like, of course, I already do this verbally. I follow up in email form and write it out, but I know it gets lost. So having an actual visual map and thinking about that was really kind of a game changer for the whole game plan, not only to hold ourselves, well, first and foremost, to clarify for our clients, right? What is the journey you're going to be in for? Here it is in black and white, or sometimes in color. And having that ready at the go has just been incredibly helpful. But then it also doubles as basically a roadmap for our checklists, right? Holding ourselves accountable to making sure we're delivering on the expectations we provide them with. The other big thing I think I learned was it didn't dawn on me till a little ways in that, okay, I'm doing this to ensure that I have a consistent client experience across all projects, not just, in a spotty way, but consistently across the board. That one of the side benefits would be, now I have not only improved my client experience to hopefully down the line enable these clients to be referral sources, but also they are now primed to be fantastic client references. And I'm expanding my client reference repertoire, which, but that was something I hadn't considered before.
It's kind of crazy when we become business owners, all the things it takes that we need in our brains, from all the different avenues and facets of all the things that we know we need to be doing. And some things we just need to be reminded of, right? Like those are like the duh moment. I have them all the time too. I'm like, oh yeah, duh. Like, I'm pretty sure I knew that, but somewhere along the way with all the million other things that I try to do as I'm trying to run a business, is remember all those things too. So I love the duh moments. I think the duh moments remind us that, oh yeah, I knew that. Now I just needed to be reminded so I could put it into action. So yes, it's interesting. Every time I get on a call with somebody who's thinking about joining one of the programs, I am thinking about, okay, this is an attorney. I know the 3 people who would absolutely at least have an email exchange or get on the call with this person to talk about their experience with GBR or something like that. Or, okay, this person's a real estate agent. So I think that is a brilliant aha kind of duh moment to have. Absolutely. So That's awesome. Was there anything else that when you were kind of looking at your client experience in this kind of step-by-step way that, here we're doing it on the podcast and obviously it's coming up in the book, but that you did when you went through the sticky client experience, was there anything else that kind of helped how you changed how you viewed your client experience, like from whether it was from the stages, like, oh, there's stages, like there's 3 stages, because you guys definitely have the 3 stages, or there's a 2-part formula of work building and work touch points and relationship building touch points. Was there anything that kind of helped you change how you saw your client experience?
Absolutely. I think bringing it into the 3 stages had an immediate benefit of just being able to clarify for ourselves what are our objectives during each of the 3 stages. Once we could define exactly when a new client experience began and ended, and then that critical point of, okay, when the active stage begins and ends, and what are our objectives kind of for each stage, and what are we trying to accomplish, but also deliver in terms of what the client is experiencing. That really was helpful to break it down that way and be intentional. The other piece of it, I think that really was super helpful was separating the work and personal relationship touch points. I think it's work and relationship touch points.
Yes.
Throughout the journey. I think before that, I had more of an intuitive approach where I was kind of conflating the 2 together. So I was always trying to add a relationship piece or personal aspect on layering on top of the work, but sprinkled in inconsistently, right? And, I think, in hindsight, I may have been guilty of trying to use a relationship response to compensate for something that may not have worked out on the work front. Whereas now I can separate the 2 and kind of tackle and fix each separately. So an example would be, let's say I have a work deliverable that for whatever reason is facing a delay. So of course I'm going to communicate that with the client as I always would and say, here's what's ahead of us. Unfortunately, this is happening. So this is how we're going to pivot and this is how we're going to remedy it. Communicate, fix, and move on. And I can separate that in my mind strategically for how I'm operating that project and handling that client from, this is a separate issue from me making sure that my calendar reminds me to check in, when I know they're expecting their new baby, and how is that life checkpoint? And is there anything we can do to help, or sending them a newborn gift or something like that? Those are completely separate things that, yes, have to do with this client and their experience, but have to be tackled and managed very differently.
I always say the main objective of the client experience is to have your client say at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, at some point, wow, I just didn't expect that from my architect. Right. So if we're thinking about it from your perspective, there's certain things that I just expect when I hire you. I kind of expect a house that's going to be built to the right code with the right standards. That's going to give me I'm going to pass my CO, right? Like there's just certain things I kind of expect when I go into working with an architect or a builder. And I'm just using your industry since you're an architect, but like, there's just certain things I expect. I don't expect to get plans where I'm building a 3-story house and you forgot to add in the first story, right? Like there's just certain things I come to expect. And most people think that's the client experience. I'm like, no, that's like the barrier to entry. Like that's like you even having a license or being able to do what you do. It's the good stuff that you would produce for your client. Like that's what I would expect. When we think about having a client experience that helps us, and as we've been learning here on the podcast, guys, you guys have been listening, we talk about this. The reason why we have this client experience is to overcome the buyer's remorse and to make sure that we build the right type of reputation, and to make sure that when their clients think about doing this again, they only want to do it with us and couldn't imagine repeating as a client with anybody else. And then of course, the holy grail, we want referrals as well, amongst all the other things that a great client experience is going to give us. But it is absolutely above the minimum standard of like the work. And so when you think about the way that Jackie's kind of talking about her client experience and how you're seeing it and hearing it, it is an intentionality behind the relationship piece that goes along with the work piece. And in some cases, people go through the program and they're like, I actually need to elevate the work, not just add the relationship. And others, I would make the assumption, probably Jackie, like you guys, it's more of like, we have all the work pieces in place. And now we can just make sure they're all flowing and fitting together. And we see it differently, which means we get to be more effective and efficient on implementing it and then thinking through those relationship touch points that are key as well. I mean, it really is the above and beyond piece is what I'm after for people when they really get that sticky client experience. And so I love to hear you talk about it in that way because, I mean, let's be honest, I'm probably never going to renovate or build a house in San Francisco. So I'll probably never have the opportunity to work with you, but I can only imagine of all the conversations we've ever had about your business. And as long as you've been a student of all my programs, actually, I mean, GBR, Sticky Client Experience, and Goal Finishers Club, like having you in all of them, and then Inner Circle, like it really helps me understand your business even more than just like somebody that doesn't really engage once they join any of my programs. I know you deliver this stuff. Like I can just sense it, but it's so great to hear someone like be able to like say it back to me in terms of what they've grasped from it and they got it. It's not the bare minimum. It's the going above and beyond and not having your client expect that from you, whatever it is that you do. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with everything most of everything. I'm going to touch on that San Francisco thing in a second, but absolutely everything you just said, which is, for us, we had the cake. We had to get a little more organized about all those work delivery points, lining up and feeling more seamless and flowing in a way that kind of could be really felt on the client side and hold us accountable. I think that accountability was a big piece of that. But yeah, it's the icing on the cake was understanding that relationship piece, identifying it, being intentional about it, and making sure that comes part and parcel consistently for all our projects. And knowing that, again, as I said before, like I'm not going to be able to fix a work problem by sending them a client present. That's the wrong message, right? And for me, it's like just being very clear about what each can accomplish and how they work together and complement each other. You can't have one without the other, I think. And then to your point, Stacey, never say never. We are always looking at ways to expand our geographical reach. And if anything that COVID has taught us, which is, we're remote work, opens new opportunities. So never say never.
Well, once I get my youngest off to college, it's tiny house in the mountains. Here I come. So you can design my tiny house.
I'm so there.
But it's going to have to be a tiny house plus because Norm, my husband's like, I'm not living in a tiny house with you. Like, you got to give me some more rooms. And I'm like, you will have a he shed in the back, just like I will have a she shed in the back. And then right in between both of them will be a hot tub. I'm like, it's perfect. I got it all worked out. I know. Okay. Fantastic. So anyways, back to what we're here for. All right. Let me ask you just a few kind of rapid fire questions from your perspective. Let's dive into the active stage just a little bit more. So we just talked about this in the episode that, almost preceded this. It was episode 159. I kind of dove into the active stage. And so for this, I just want to kind of dive in for you so people can hear how to put this in perspective of another business owner thinking through the answers. So for you, when does your active stage start? And then how long is it?
So to answer that question, I have to tell you when my new client stage ends. And we, as you know, and just for anybody who might be listening and is curious, our client experiences can be as short as 10 months, and it can be as long as 4 or 5 years. So there is quite a range of time, and, several years ongoing is kind of too much for any brain and any personal experience to really measure in an easy way. So all this is to say, the new stage for us, we decided, was from the moment we get the yes to the moment that they've had their first taste of the real meat and potatoes of what we deliver. And for us, I think that really needs to be, that first design experience. Because there's a bunch of stuff we have to get going in the beginning stages that does take a number of weeks, unfortunately, and we are very clear about this up front. But, we have to do what's called the pre-design phase. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of, nuts and bolts. What does your property zoning look like? And what does that have to do with your permit process? And a lot of this kind of upfront stuff. It's not really that sexy. So we want to make sure that our new client experience includes not just that stuff, but ends with, okay, now we've taken that first leap into the design stuff. It ends with the first design presentation we give them where they actually get to light up and say, this is the stuff I'm waiting for, right? This is what we've been going through the last few weeks to get to this point. So that's how we decided that's where our new client stage ends. And so the active stage picks up right there, right after they've had their kind of first foray into, this is the design of your dream home. Let's get started. And we're rolling up our sleeves and we start to be very interactive with them from that point on. So for the rest of the active stage, which again can be at this point 9 months to several years, until the project is complete. And that's when the active stage ends, which is they've got their keys, they're ready to move into their new home, renovation's done, or expansion or new house is done. And we can say, congratulations, here's your bottle of champagne, and, let us know how it goes,
Perfect.
So that in a nutshell is our active stage.
So, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on to talk about the active stage, because for some folks listening, their active stage is very routine and rhythmic. It's we do this, we do this, we do this, and we're done. For others, there's so many external factors that determine how long your active stage will last, right? So as an architect, there are many, many, many things that are completely outside of your control that will dictate how long it will take a project to go from start to finish. Same thing with a real estate agent, right? It may take months or even a year before your client finally settles on the home they want to buy. But for a financial advisor or a CPA, it's very rhythmic. It's very like, yes, we move all your money over, we start managing it, and then you're done, right? Or I get all your information, I file your first year of taxes, and then I do it every year. Like, so for some, it's very rhythmic and the same thing happens all the time. For others, it's hard to say it's going to end at the 10-month mark. And so you have to do it by when things happen, not when dates on the calendar pass. And so that's really why I wanted Jackie to kind of explain that to us, because I want you guys to see there's not a right or a wrong here. It's you're the business owner. Like, you have to make the determination of when it starts and when it stops. And Jackie definitely has probably one of the longer potential active stage than most people. So I think that's really good for how you guys can listen to her here, how she's brought all those pieces together. So that is perfect. Was there anything new? And you already mentioned the journey map, which is funny because I think that's everybody's favorite piece, because Erin mentioned it too. And it's definitely my favorite piece. But was there any other new, like either work or relationship touch points, specifically though in your active stage, that you added based on what you learned through the program?
Yeah. And I would say the one that I think has been maybe the most intentional for us, and we had a version of this, I think, was, I think in your training, you take it as a, for instance, a calendar check-in, a 6-month check-in or 12-month check-in, something like that. Some sort of, not too regular, but paced check-in point with your client. And for us, it didn't make sense to just arbitrarily pick a number of months, but more tailor that to the journey map, right? If in the active stage, for instance, if we've accomplished a certain phase of work that is a milestone in the project, those are the moments where I'm going to, make sure to intentionally give someone a call or offer to take them to coffee or something and just say, hey, this is not work related. I just want to see how you guys are doing. We've just hit this milestone. We've talked about all the nuts and bolts, but how are you feeling? I
think it's perfect. I think sometimes it's the simplest things that can have the biggest impact, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you think about your client experience as a whole, how would you, I'm going to put you on the spot because you did not know this question was coming, but I really want to end with this question. When you think about your client experience of today versus what it was 2-3 years ago, right? Particularly when you guys were first getting started and kind of had your first year under your belt, and you think about how your client experience looks today versus how it looked back then. If you could pick a word, or maybe I should be a little more generous and say a couple of words or a statement that would describe the change that it's experienced, how would you describe it?
It's consistency, consistency, consistency. I think, I'll be honest, prior to implementing this, I knew I got refers most by people who just loved us the most, right? Just their hearts burst for us. We just have a wonderful connection. And they probably overlooked a few things that maybe fell through the cracks over the times, right? Which in hindsight, I would have wished nothing more to have gone back and done better. But hey, we all start somewhere and we have to make mistakes along the way. And these are the people who have been very forgiving and seen beyond that to know what our intentions are and can also see where we're going with our business and that we're improving every day. And now I'm able to have just a confidence that I have a system in place. I know every client is getting a consistent experience. I know that experience is living up more and more each month to our ideal client experience. And I don't have to worry about what may or may not have gotten covered, because you know what? We hit the most important points and we're being consistent and we're communicating clearly. And so that's all I can do. And I sleep very well at night.
I think that is perfect. I mean, I think you summed it up so well. Consistency and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great thing to come out of, making an investment in this program and then taking it and putting it into practice within your business and seeing that investment come to fruition, knowing that walking away from that, you've got this consistency and this confidence. That is huge. And I think that, let's be honest, it only happened, Jackie, though, because you actually decided to roll up your sleeves and do the work. And that goes for everything that we do in life, right? It doesn't matter how many training programs you invest in or coaching programs you invest in or books you decide to read or webinars you decide to watch or masterminds you decide to join. When we roll up our sleeves and do the work that we have learned and to fill a gap that we know we need filled, that's when we get to see the true magic happen. And I mean, Jackie's heard me say this before. We can't see her, of course, so maybe she's blushing, maybe she's not, maybe she's rolling her eyes because she's like, I've heard this before. But Jackie, at the end of the day, you're just an excellent student. Like you identified gaps in your business. You sought out the right resource that would work well for you. And I'm just so unbelievably thankful that that was me. And then you put it into practice and then you had success, which is now why you've been on the podcast a couple of times to talk about that success, because it's important for other business owners to understand that, yes, I can be just like Jackie. You don't need to be like Mike. You need to be like Jackie, and you can be just like her and have that same success. But at the end of the day, what separates the Jackies of the world from others is that Jackie did the work. She went through the training. She rolled up her sleeves. She asked questions when she had them, and then she put it into practice. And then she made herself stay consistent with it. And that's not just on the client experience program, but also in the Growth by Referrals program. And then, of course, in the Goal Finishers Club as well. I see the same dedication to doing what she's learned and putting it into practice across all of my programs. And my guess is anybody else that she's investing with is probably seeing the same thing as well. So, Jackie, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast and sharing again how you have taken something you've learned, put it into practice, and then had great success with it so that others can kind of see themselves through what you've been able to do. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Stacy. And I was blushing a little bit, and I'll just add on to that. Yes, it takes a lot of work. You are absolutely right. It will pay off. I'm happy to attest to that. But to credit your system, you have taught it and laid it out in such a digestible, accessible way that there is no way I would have gotten this much out of it, even having put the work into it, had you not laid it out so brilliantly. And it really isn't something that you can set and forget. You have to keep at it. But I will say that after you've kept at it for a little bit, and I'm not even 1 year through, you very quickly can see the brilliance of the system, because it is just such a clear framework on which you can easily layer and build. And you will see what I mean when you get there.
All right. Wasn't that an awesome interview with Jackie? She is just so very amazing. I got to admit, there are so many students and throughout all of my programs, Growth by Referrals, Sticky Client Experience, Inner Circle, Goal Finishers Club. There are so many students that are in all of my programs that I just absolutely adore, because not only do they decide to make the investment in their business and come into those programs, they then actually do the work of what's in those programs, and then they come back and they share with me the results that they have. And I love being able to highlight and spotlight those folks, whether it's just in a testimonial or case study, maybe it's on our website or in any of the information about the programs that we have, or in other cases, it's like this, featuring them on the podcast. And some of these folks are even going to see featured in my upcoming book, which is all about the sticky client experience. Though that is not the title, it is going to be all about that client experience, building a sticky client experience, because we want repeat clients and referrals. So I love it when I get the opportunity to showcase how the business owners who have gone through my programs have actually come out the other side with the success that they've had and what they've learned from it. And Jackie is one of my favorites to have come back, because she's so willing, and she's so willing to be so open to share what she learned and what she didn't know before, and how she was able to change her thought process by going through the programs. So, of course, I would love for you to share your thoughts with us in the Referrals Without Asking Facebook group, or questions that you have. Do you have questions about the active stage? Is there something that Jackie talked about that you wanted to know more about? By all means, please hop into our Referrals Without Asking Facebook group. It is our free community over on Facebook, Referrals Without Asking, where you can ask your questions or share your thoughts as well. And of course, we are continuing, but about to wrap up up, as crazy as this is, we are continuing with the client experience with our next episode, episode 162, as we are going to dive into the alumni stage. But just a few episodes to go, and we're going to wrap up our client experience. So I hope if you haven't taken time to go back to start with episode 151 and work your way forward. Of course, these episodes, they're not going anywhere. They'll always be here for you. But I also think that this summertime, which is kind of how we had this planned, but this summertime season was a great opportunity to kind of dig into the client experience. So for those of you who may be finding a little bit more downtime in your business, some of you are busier than ever, but others of you are finding a little bit more downtime during the summer months in your business. It's a great time to be paying attention to your client experience and deciding to get intentional about it and making changes, which is what this series has been about. Of course, this series is probably our longest series we've ever done because it's going to be about, 13 or 14 episodes before we finish up. But again, we do have another one coming up. We've got to get through the final stage of the client experience, the alumni stage. And I can't wait to do that with you guys next week. But until then, take control and grow your business. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Roadmap to Grow Your Business podcast. To access all resources and links mentioned in today's show and to connect with Stacy, head over to www.stacybrownrandall.com.